The main Terran fleet was leaving. The big, scarred ships that had broken the swarm were pulling away from Luminar, their engines glowing with a steady, blue-white flame. They were heading for the jump point, the place where they would vanish into faster-than-light travel. More signals for help had been heard from other parts of the galaxy. More fires were burning. The demons had other battles to fight, but not all of them left. A single Terran station, brought in prefabricated sections, now orbited the system's outer gas giant. It was called Watchtower. It was not beautiful. It was a collection of blocky modules, fuel tanks, and communication dishes, all connected by skeletal walkways. It looked like a piece of industrial machinery stuck in space. Around it, a small contingent of Terran ships patrolled a few destroyers. A carrier for the Wasp fighters, some fast scout vessels. Major Lee Era stood on the command deck of Watchtower. She had been promoted. Her armor was cleaner now, but it was still the same functional suit. Her helmet was off, and her black hair was cut short and practical. Her face was calm, but her eyes never stopped moving, watching the data streams on the screens around her. She was the new liaison to the Alara Defense Force. Her job was to help them prepare, to teach them so that maybe next time they would not need to call for demons. On the Alara side, Commodore Celis had been given the job of working with her. Celis's ship, the Eternal Song, was repaired. Its crystal hull gleamed perfectly again. But Celis felt different inside. She had seen the asteroid belt. She had seen the way the Terrans fought. The memory of it was a cold stone in her stomach. Celis took a small, elegant shuttle from Luminar to Watchtower. The journey felt strange. Her shuttle was quiet and smooth. The Terran station grew larger in her viewport, a stark, angular shadow against the swirling orange and yellow clouds of the gas giant. It was the opposite of her world in every way. She docked, and the process was just as jarring as the first time. The magnetic clamps grabbed her shuttle with a jarring thud. The air that mixed when the doors opened was dry and recycled, smelling of metal and filtered oxygen. A young Terran soldier in a simple jumpsuit guided her to the command deck. The corridors were narrow, the lights were bright and white, and everything was bolted down. There were no gentle curves. Lee Era greeted her with a nod. "Commodore, thank you for coming." "Major," Celis replied, trying to sound at ease. Lee Era gestured to a holographic map of the system. "We have set up a new early warning network. Sensors on many of the larger asteroids. The swarm is wounded, but it might come back. Or something else might come. It is best to see them early." Her fingers moved over a control panel, and the map lit up with dozens of small green dots. "We are also running training simulations for your pilots. Basic evasive maneuvers. How to fight in debris fields. How to use your point defense not just as a shield, but to cut apart enemy drones." Celis looked at the map. The Terran preparations were not about creating a beautiful, harmonious defense. They were about creating a web of traps and early alarms. They were about turning the system itself into a weapon. "You think like hunters," Celis said quietly. Lee Era looked at her. "We think like survivors," she corrected, her voice even. "Your people are artists. You build beautiful things that last, my people. We are good at making things that keep other things from being broken, even if the way we do it is not beautiful." Celis thought of the garden ceremony, of Admiral Park's words. "You said we were yours to protect. Does that mean you own us now?" A flicker of something amusement? Sadness passed over Lee Era's face. "No, it means we answered the call. When you send a signal like that, you are saying, 'My survival matters.' We heard that. We agree, so we will protect that survival. Not own it. It is a responsibility, one we take very seriously." Later, Celis asked to see Sergeant Kim June before he left. She was directed to a maintenance bay deep in the station. It was a loud, busy place. The air smelled of welding smoke and lubricant. Mechanics worked on weapons and armor parts. And there, in one corner, was June. He was not in his full armor. He wore a dark gray undersuit. He was welding a new plate onto the frame of a heavy plasma cutter. Sparks flew in bright orange arcs, painting his focused face in flashes of light. She waited until he turned off the torch and lifted his visor. Sweat gleamed on his forehead. "You are leaving with the fleet," Salas said. June nodded, wiping his face with a cloth. New signal. Another system. Another angel request. He said the word with no mockery, just a simple fact. The swarm hit others before you. We are going to the next one. Salas looked around the bay, at the tools of war being repaired and improved. And after? When there are no more fires to fight, what does Earth do then? June was quiet for a moment. He looked at the welder in his hand, and out a nearby viewport, not at the gas giant, but at the distant, steady stars. "I do not know," he said honestly. His voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Maybe we learn to build something that is not a weapon. My brother is an engineer on Mars. He builds water reclamation plants. That is a good thing to build. But out here," he gestured to the station, the ships, the cutter frame. "Out here, the galaxy keeps calling, and it is not asking for water plants." He put down his tools and walked with her to a large observation window. Together, they looked out at the departing Terran fleet. The ships were like a small constellation of hard, bright dots moving away. "You called out for angels," June said, his eyes on the ships. "You don't get to be picky about what answers. You just hope that what answers is on your side." The fleet reached the jump point. For a second, space itself seemed to twist and flash. Then they were gone, vanished, gone to bring their particular kind of hell to another heaven that was in trouble. Salas returned to her shuttle. As she flew back toward the gentle light of her twin moons and her crystal city, she looked back. The Watchtower station was just a tiny, hard-edged speck against the giant planet. A little piece of darkness left behind to guard the light. That night, on Luminar, the Alara people slept. For the first time in many cycles, they did not dream of the swarm's silent, hungry approach. The fear was still there, but it was quieter. They were guarded now, not by angels in shining armor. They were guarded by quiet, watchful demons in a station of gray metal, who understood the darkness better than anyone, and who had decided, for reasons of their own, that this light was worth keeping on. The silence in the asteroid belt was deeper now. It was the quiet of a charnel house, a butcher shop after the day's work is done. The wreckage was immense. Drifting chunks of swarm tissue, frozen into grotesque sculptures, mingled with the torn and blackened metal of Terran warships. Fires had burned out in the vacuum, leaving only scorched scars. The tumbling rocks were painted with new marks of violence, impact craters from railgun slugs, smears of strange fluids, fields of glittering debris. The swarm was gone. Not destroyed, the scouts confirmed, but broken, its hive mind scattered and reeling. It had retreated into the deep void to heal. The Alara system was saved. The twin moons still shone on Luminar's unbroken crystal spires. On the surface of Luminar, a ceremony was prepared. It was held in the highest garden, a place where flowers of light bloomed in soft hues, and the air was sweet with perfume. The entire high chorus of the Alara was there, beings of immense age and gentle wisdom, dressed in robes that shimmered like captured nebulae. Soft, harmonic music played from unseen sources. It was a scene of perfect, elegant peace. Commodore Salas stood to one side, her own simple uniform feeling crude in this company. She watched as the Terran delegation approached. They had cleaned their armor, but it was still the same brutal, angular plating. It gleamed dully, not with a polished shine, but with the matte finish of a tool that has been heavily used. They moved with their same rhythmic, alert stride, but it was slower now. They were tired. Sergeant Kim Jung walked at their head, his helmet off, his scarred face expressionless. Behind him was Admiral Park Min, who had transferred from the crippled to Messian. He walked with a slight stiffness, an old injury acting up, but his gaze was steady. They looked utterly alien in the garden of light. They were shadows among the glow. The Alara citizens who watched from graceful balconies did not cheer. They whispered. They looked at these beings with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and a fear they could not name. The head of the high chorus, an Alara so old her light was almost white, floated forward. Her voice, when she spoke, was like many bells chiming softly together. It was translated for the humans. "Children of Terra," she chimed. "You have come from across the stars, answering a call you did not have to heed. You have fought a horror we could not face. You have shed your blood in our defense. You have saved our world, our song, our future. For this we offer our deepest, most eternal gratitude." She made a gentle motion with her long-fingered hand. Two younger Ilara stepped forward, carrying cushions of woven light. On them rested two crystalline metals, shaped like swirling galaxies, pulsing with a soft inner light. They were the star of celestial mercy, the highest honor the Alara could bestow. It was given for acts of pure, selfless compassion. To Admiral Park Min and to Sergeant Kim Jung, we present the star. May it be a reminder across the years that mercy is the universe's highest law. The music swelled. The Alara audience bowed their heads in a wave of respect. Admiral Park stepped forward first. He looked at the beautiful crystal medal, then at his own hand. It was rough, scarred by decades of holding tools and controls, stained with grease that never fully washed out. He reached out and took the star. Its delicate light looked wrong in his grasp. Like holding a butterfly with a wrench dot, he did not immediately put it on. He held it, turning it slightly, watching the light play within. Then he looked up, not just at the high chorus, but at the gathered Alara, and finally at his own Marines standing at rigid attention, their armor still bearing the fresh scratches and carbon, scoring from the battle. "You call this mercy," Park said, his translated voice echoing in the quiet garden. It sounded even rougher here. "You call us angels. This is a mistake." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. The music faltered and died. "Angels," Park continued, "are beings of light. They offer miracles without cost. They lift you up without getting dirty." He looked at the medal again. "We are not that. We looked at your call, and we had no miracles to send. We only had what we have always had, what we built for ourselves." Kim Jun spoke then, his low rasp a counterpoint to the Admiral's gravelly tone. "We heard a cry for salvation, but the only thing we could send was what we use on each other, what we built for our own worst days, our own darkest hours." He looked at Celis, and she saw in his eyes not pride, but a kind of grim honesty. "We sent our demons, our rage, our violence, our willingness to break everything, including ourselves, to protect what we decide is ours." He paused, letting the words hang in the perfumed air. "Today, you are ours to protect. So we broke the swarm, not with light, with darkness, with tricks, with traps, with blood." Admiral Park nodded, looking back at the high chorus. "You hoped for divine intervention. You got the only thing my people know how to do. We saw a threat. We calculated the cost. And we paid it." He gestured vaguely back toward the sky, toward the belt full of dead ships and dead soldiers. "That cost is up there. That is the price of your mercy. It is not clean. It is not beautiful. It is ugly and loud, and it leaves scars. The garden was utterly silent. The beautiful narrative of angelic rescuers shattered, replaced by a colder, harder truth. These Terrans were not uplifters. They were survivors. Their gift was not compassion, but a ferocious, terrible capacity for protection, forged in their own violent history. They had not come from a place of peace to share it. They had come from a place of war to wage it on someone else's behalf. The old chorus leader bowed her head, not in ceremony now, but in a kind of sad understanding. The light of the unsung metals seemed to dim. Salas understood completely now, looking at the stone-faced June and the tired Admiral Park. The universe had wanted a surgeon to perform a graceful operation. Instead, it got a field medic with a dirty knife and a tourniquet who stopped the bleeding by any means necessary. They were not angels of mercy. They were the demons who had held the line. And in the silent garden, under the soft light of the flowers, that truth was more frightening and more humbling than any angelic legend could ever be. The debt felt heavier now, not lighter. It was not a debt of thanks, but a debt to the darkness these humans carried within them, a darkness they had spilled into the void to keep the light of Luminar burning. The asteroid belt was a place of deep, permanent night. Jagged mountains of rock and ice tumbled silently through the vacuum, painted only by the cold, distant light of the system's sun. It was here, in this chaotic and lonely graveyard of celestial debris, that the Terrans chose to make their stand. To the watching Elara on their ships, holding position near Luminar, it looked like madness. Their own tactics were based on unity, elegant formations, and harmonious energy fields. The Terran fleet arrived. It was nothing like the Elara's glowing vessels. Admiral Park Min's command ship, the Tumesian, was a slab of armored alloy covered in sensor spines and weapon mounts. The carriers were long, flat runways attached to engines, already launching swarms of tiny, aggressive-looking fighter craft called wasps. The destroyers were all brutal angles and massive, spine-like railguns that glowed with a threatening blue charge. On the bridge of the Eternal Song, Salas and Kalen watched the tactical feed. The human ships did not form a neat defensive line. They scattered. They hid behind the largest asteroids. They positioned themselves in shadowy craters. Some even used short, harsh bursts of thrust to match the tumble of the rocks, becoming just another piece of moving debris. They are hiding, Kalen said, his voice confused. They break every rule of fleet engagement. They have no unified defensive matrix. A single swarm tendril could pick them off one by one. Admiral Park's face appeared on a comm screen. He was an older man, his face lined and his hair gray, but his eyes were as sharp and active as Sergeant Kim June's. "Commodore Salas," he said, his translated voice blunt. "Your ships have excellent point defense lasers. Precise. You will form a screen here, here, and here." 3 points lit up on the tactical map, far behind the asteroid belt, closer to the planet. Your only job is to intercept any swarm micro-drones that get past us. They will be small, fast, and aimed at your planet's atmosphere. Do not, I repeat, do not engage the main swarm bodies. Leave the big ones to us. Admiral, your fleet is exposed. Salas protested. If you do not present a unified front, the swarm will overwhelm each of your ships individually. A faint, grim smile touched Park's lips. That's the idea, Commodore. We're not a wall. We're a wasp nest. And we're the bait. Swarm follows heat, noise, and electromagnetic signatures. We're about to make this the noisiest, hottest patch of space in this system. Park out. The connection cut. Salas felt a wave of cold nausea. They were sacrificing themselves. Then the swarm arrived. It did not look like a fleet. It looked like a stain spreading across the stars. It was a wave of shifting, chitinous forms, some as small as a shuttle, others larger than the Tumesian, all moving as one mindless, hungry mass. It pulsed with a sickly gray light. It saw the scattered, noisy, hot Terran fleet, and, just as Admiral Park predicted, it surged toward them, ignoring the silent Alara ships further back. For a moment, there was only the terrible, silent approach. Then, space itself seemed to tear apart. From behind a dozen large asteroids, Terran vessels fired. But they did not fire energy beams. They launched missiles, thousands of them. They were not aimed at the swarm directly. They flew into the spaces between the swarm's tendrils and detonated. There were no fiery explosions. Instead, they burst into enormous, shimmering spheres of blinding white energy electromagnetic pulse warheads. The effect was immediate and visible. The perfect, synchronized movement of the swarm faltered. The gray light flickered. Whole sections of it seemed to go dormant, drifting or moving in confused, random directions. The hive mind was disrupted, if only for a few seconds. In those seconds, hell was unleashed from the shadows. The massive railguns on the Terran destroyers, having charged in silent hiding, fired. They did not fire explosive shells. They fired solid slugs of tungsten, larger than a bus, accelerated to a speed that defied belief. They were invisible streaks of death. They hit the largest swarm entities not with an explosion, but with a catastrophic transfer of kinetic energy. Chitinous armor the Alara beams could not scratch, simply vaporized on impact. The slugs punching straight through and out the other side, leaving gaping, mangled holes. Secondary explosions rippled through the swarm bodies as internal systems failed. Then came the kinetic impactors. These were not even guns. They were asteroids, small moons really, that the Terrans had secretly tethered to and fitted with massive thruster packs. On command, the thrusters fired, pushing these mountains of rock onto a collision course. The swarm, still confused from the EMPs, could not react in time. A continent-sized swarm processor was struck head-on by a 50-kilometer-wide rock. The soundless collision was apocalyptic. The swarm entities simply disintegrated into a cloud of frozen pulp and shattered machinery. On the ground, it was just as brutal. A key Alara mining colony on an asteroid had been infested. Sergeant Choi Tae's squad, including Lee Era, moved through the darkened, violated habitat halls. The walls were covered in a pulsating, gray organic web. Strange, crab-like constructs skittered towards them. The Terrans did not try to reclaim the air. Choi Tae gave a hand signal. A soldier placed a shaped charge on a main atmospheric valve. It blew. With a scream of escaping gas, the entire section was vented to vacuum. The swarm forms, unprotected, froze solid and burst. The Terrans, sealed in their powered armor, were unaffected. They moved forward in the sudden, airless silence, their external lights cutting through the drifting frost and debris. Contact left. 3 forms, adapting, Liera said, her voice calm in Choi's helmet. He saw them. The swarm creatures were now growing hard metallic plates over their bodies. Switch to proton cutters. No more messing around. Blue beams of searing energy lanced from the Terran weapons, slicing through the new metallic armor like it was paper, carving the creatures apart. Back in space, the battle was not one-sided. The swarm adapted. It sent waves of tiny, fast drones that overwhelmed and destroyed several Terran wasps. A swarm energy beam, a corrosive green lance, found the flank of a Terran cruiser. It burned through the armor, and the ship broke apart, a silent flower of fire and metal. The Alara watched, hearts in their throats, as human lives were snuffed out by the dozens, by the hundreds. But for every Terran ship lost, a vast swarm entity was torn apart. The Terrans fought with a terrifying, reckless economy. They used the asteroids as shields as weapons, as bait. They lured parts of the swarm into narrow channels and then collapsed both ends with precisely timed explosives, trapping and crushing them. They fought not to defend a position, but to inflict maximum damage. It was a calculated, brutal exchange of blood for time. After hours of this violence, the unthinkable happened. The swarm advance stopped. The great gray stain began to recede, pulling its remaining tendrils back from the chaotic, corpse-filled field of asteroids. It was not destroyed, but it was crippled, hurt in a way it had never been before. On the bridge of the eternal song, there was no cheering, only a stunned, profound silence. The Alara had just witnessed a miracle of violence. They had not seen angels wield holy light. They had seen demons use the very darkness as a weapon. They had seen salvation bought, not with grace, but with calculated, ruthless savagery. And it had worked. The docking bay of the eternal song was a place of serene beauty. Gentle light, the color of a dawn sky, spilled from the living crystal walls and ceiling. The air smelled faintly of ozone and blooming flowers, a scent carefully maintained by the ship's environmental systems. A group of Alara officials waited in silence, their luminescent skin adding to the soft glow of the room. They stood tall and graceful, their robes flowing around them like liquid silk. They were ready to receive angels, or at least the diplomats of a brave, compassionate race. Commodore Sullus stood at the front of the group. She tried to calm her racing heart. The swarm was getting closer with every passing hour. This ship, the UTC Jakarta, was their only thread of hope. She pictured a vessel, perhaps not as elegant as her own, but sturdy and scientific, filled with wise faces and offers of advanced technology. An alarm chimed softly, not a blaring noise, but a melodic tone. "The Terran vessel is on final approach," Kalen said from beside her. On the large viewing screen, they saw it. The hope in Celis's chest tightened into a knot of cold confusion. The ship that filled the screen was not elegant. It was a brutal, angular block of dark gray metal. It had no graceful curves. It was all hard edges, sharp lines, and blunt surfaces. Scars of blackened metal and pockmarks from tiny impacts covered its hull. Protruding from it were what could only be weapons, barrels and missile pods, and strange, spiked antennas. It looked less like a ship and more like a piece of a fortress that had been torn off and thrown into space. It moved with a shocking, aggressive speed, turning at the last moment to align with the docking port. Instead of matching the eternal song's gentle rotation, it fired sharp bursts from its thrusters, forcing itself into position. A heavy metallic arm slammed out from its side, not with the gentle magnetic seal the Alara used, but with a crushing magnetic clamp that grabbed onto the docking ring. The entire frame of the eternal song shuddered. A sound like a dying beast, a deep groan of stressed metal, echoed through the bay. Several Alara flinched, their large eyes wide with alarm. This was not a diplomatic docking. It was an assault. The docking connection sealed with a final, deafening thud. Then came the hiss of equalizing pressure. The air that rushed from the Terran ship's airlock was visible, a faint haze. It carried a smell that made the Alara recoil. It was a mix of stale sweat, hot machinery, ozone, oil, and something sharp and chemical. It was the smell of a workshop, a garage, a place of hard labor and tension. It was utterly alien to the clean, perfumed air of the Alara ship. The inner door of the airlock slid open with a gritty, mechanical sound. No one walked out. They marched. They were huge, encased in armor that mirrored their ship, angular, thick, and painted in matte blacks and dusty grays. The armor added a full foot of height and breadth to their forms, making them look like moving statues of war. Their helmets were featureless, with dark, opaque visors that showed no face, only a reflection of the stunned Alara. They carried heavy weapons, not held loosely or pointed at the ceiling, but gripped firmly across their chests, fingers resting near triggers. They moved into the bay in a precise rhythmic pattern, each soldier covering a different angle, their helmets constantly swiveling. The soft light of the bay gleamed dully on their scarred plating dot. There were 6 of them. They formed a loose half-circle around the airlock, and then the leader stepped forward. He reached up, his movements efficient and sure, and released the seals on his helmet with a series of clicks and a hiss of escaping air. He pulled the helmet off. The face underneath was human. His name was Kim June. His hair was cropped so short it was almost invisible. A pale old scar cut through his left eyebrow. His skin was tanned and lined, not with age, but with squinting into harsh lights. His eyes were the color of dark stone, and they moved quickly, scanning the room, the Alara, the ceiling, the exits, assessing everything as a potential threat or a piece of tactical data. There was no friendly smile, only a flat, focused expression. "Commodore Sullis," he said. His voice was a low rasp, translated by a device on his wrist that emitted the musical Ilara language. It sounded wrong coming from him. "I am Sergeant Kim June, Terra's 1st Rapid Response Legion. This is my team." One of the other armored figures, slightly shorter, but moving with the same lethal grace, gave a slight nod. A female voice, filtered through the helmet, came through the external speaker. "Lee Era, point." Her weapon shifted almost imperceptibly, covering a secondary door across the bay. Celis found her voice, though it sounded thin and fragile. "Welcome, Sergeant Kim. We are grateful for your response. Your diplomats are of course welcome too." "Ma'am," June interrupted, not harshly, but with a firmness that brooked no discussion. "We are the delegation. Our job is threat assessment and immediate action. We need your full tactical data on the swarm. Every scan, every vector of approach, everything you have. Now." Kalen, looking from the terrifying soldiers to his Commodore, stepped forward slowly, holding out a small, elegant data crystal. It glowed with a soft blue light. "It is all here. Our analysis, our failed battle records." June took it. He did not place it in a delicate reader. He slotted it roughly into a port on the thick vambrace covering his forearm. A small holographic display, sharp and green and covered in jagged symbols and numbers, sprang to life above his arm. His eyes flickered across it. Lee Era's voice cut through the silence again. "Sir, the data confirms initial scans. Optimal defensive position is not here, near the planet. It's here." A point on the tactical map hovering near June's arm glowed red. It was in the thick of the system's asteroid belt. "We can use the big rocks for cover. Bottle them in the narrow channels. Fight them in the dark, where their numbers mean less." June nodded. "Agreed. A stand-up fight in open space is suicide. We fight in the rubble." He looked back at Celis, his stone-colored eyes meeting her luminous ones. "You need to issue an immediate evacuation order for your civilian habitats at the L4 and L5 Lagrange points. Right now. The swarm prioritizes dense biomass. Those stations are giant dinners. We'll move to the belt and try to cut the head off the main body. Buy your people time to get to the planet or the FTL jump points." Celis felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with the swarm. These were not rescuers. They were managers of violence. They spoke of civilian lives as logistical problems to be solved. They looked at her beautiful ship and saw a tactical weakness. They looked at the coming horror and saw only a battlefield to be shaped. "You would have us run?" Celis asked, a touch of her pride returning. "No," June said, finally putting his helmet back on. The visor sealed, turning him once more into a faceless armored demon. His voice now came from the helmet's speaker, deeper and more synthetic. I would have you live. We'll do the running. Right at them. He turned and gave a series of sharp hand signals to his team. As one, the 6 armored figures turned and moved back toward their ship, their heavy boots clanking on the delicate crystal floor, leaving scuff marks behind. The airlock hissed shut. In the sudden, perfumed silence of the bay, surrounded by the smell of oil and war, Commodore Salas understood the universe had not sent angels. It had sent something that had stared into the abyss for so long. It had learned to fight back with the same mindless hunger. They had not sent saviors. They had sent soldiers. And she was not sure if she was more afraid of the swarm or of the things that had come to fight it. The light of 2 moons, one pale blue and one a soft violet, washed over the city of Luminar. The buildings were not made of stone or metal, but of a living crystal that grew in elegant, spiraling towers. They glowed from within with a gentle, peaceful light. The air was sweet and carried the sound of soft, harmonic music. The people of the Alara Dominion moved with a slow, floating grace. Their skin had a faint luminescence, and their eyes were large and calm. They were an old people focused on art, philosophy, and the gentle exploration of the stars. They believed the universe was, at its heart, a kind place. Commodore Salas stood on the observation deck of her flagship. The eternal song. The ship was as beautiful as the city below, its shape flowing and organic, like a piece of delicate glass blown by a master. But Salas did not feel peaceful. Her luminescent skin was dull, a sign of deep fear and sadness. On the main viewing screen, replacing the lovely view of her homeworld, was a map of the star system. A large section of it at the edge was turning a sickly, pulsing gray dot. It was the swarm dot. No one knew where it came from. It was a devouring wave, a mix of biological hunger and mindless machine. It consumed everything: asteroids, gas, moons, and living worlds. It broke down all matter to fuel its own expansion. It did not communicate. It did not negotiate. It only ate. The Alara defense fleets, ships designed to deter pirates and explore nebulas, had been sent to stop it. They had fired their elegant energy beams. The beams had done nothing. The swarm had simply washed over them, absorbing the energy, then dissolving the beautiful ships into raw material. The reports from the few escape pods were filled with images of horror. The swarm was unstoppable. Salas turned to her second-in-command, Kalen. His usual calm expression was gone. "The last defensive line has fallen, Commodore," he said, his voice quiet. "The swarm will reach the outer colonies in 3 rotations. Luminar itself in 10. Our weapons are useless. Our shields might as well be made of paper." Salas closed her large eyes. She felt the weight of every life in the Dominion on her shoulders. They were not warriors. They were thinkers, dreamers, growers. They had no way to fight this thing. "There is one final option," Kalen said softly. "The siren's call." Salas nodded, a movement filled with sorrow. The siren's call was not a weapon. It was a plea, a message of last resort, sent on a special frequency across the galactic arm. It was a call for help, broadcast to any advanced civilization that might hear it. It contained their history, their art, their sciences, and their desperate situation. It was, in every way, a call for angels, for a benevolent, powerful force to come from the stars and perform a miracle. "Send it," Salas whispered. "Send the siren's call. Let the universe hear our final song." The message was sent. It was a beautiful, sad piece of data, filled with harmonic frequencies and images of Luminar's spires, of Alara children singing, of their peaceful gardens. It ended with a simple, graceful request. "We call upon the angels of the void. Heed our lament. Save us." Then they waited out across the galaxy. Other civilizations heard the call. The Grosnian hegemony, a race of stout mineral traders, heard it. They looked at the swarm data, calculated the economic cost of an intervention, and closed the channel. The Sylvan Drift, a collective of energy-based beings, felt the Alara's fear. They pitied them, but their form of life was incompatible with such a violent conflict. They offered a prayer of dissipating energy and turned away. Many others heard, and many others did nothing. The swarm was a death sentence. To fight, it was to die. Days passed on Luminar. The gray blob on the map grew larger. Panic, a quiet and despairing kind, began to spread through the Crystal City. Celes spent most of her time on the bridge of the Eternal Song, staring at the screen, hoping for a miracle. A signal arrived. It was not on the harmonic siren frequency. It was a harsh, compressed burst of raw electromagnetic noise. It scratched its way into the Eternal Song's sensitive communication array. The translation software struggled with its crude, direct structure. The message appeared on Celes's screen. It was not beautiful. It had no music. It was just words. Alara Dominion. Signal received. Situation acknowledged. Hold the line. Reinforcements inbound. United Terran Command. A flicker of hope, wild and desperate, sparked in Celes's chest. Terran? Who are they? Where is their system? She asked, her voice trembling. Kalen worked his console. The data is in our ancient archives. They are from a system called Sol, third planet. Earth, a species called humans. They achieved interstellar flight only about 200 of their years ago. The records are sparse. They are noted as being highly adaptive, but also fractious, prone to internal conflict. They are not a major galactic power. The hope turned to confusion. They are children, Celes said. What can they do against the swarm, where our finest ships failed? I do not know, Commodore, Kalen replied. But they are the only ones who answered. A second, more detailed message arrived. It contained coordinates and a time. Diplomatic and Advanced Coordination Vessel UTC Jakarta will rendezvous at your flagship. Prepare for docking. We will assess and enact defense protocol. Celes took a deep breath. They had called for angels. They were getting a diplomatic ship from a young, violent race. It was not what she prayed for, but it was all they had. Prepare the main docking bay, she ordered, her voice regaining some of its command strength. Clear a landing zone. Extend every courtesy. They are our guests. She looked out at the approaching shadow of the swarm on her screen, a vast, hungry blot eating the stars. Then she looked at the coordinates of the incoming human ship, a tiny, stubborn point of light moving toward them. She wondered what kind of people would run toward such certain destruction when every other wise and ancient race had run away. The beautiful, crystal docking bay of the Eternal Song was prepared. Soft light played over the smooth floor. A contingent of Alara dignitaries in flowing robes stood ready, their faces a mix of fear and fragile hope. They were waiting for angels. What was coming was something else entirely.